Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Everyone wants to be fulfilled at work. We want to feel like we're doing something valuable to make the world a better place. The problem is most people aren't engaged at work, and they question whether it's even possible to align work with meaning. Today's guest, Shawn Askinosie, is on a mission to change that. In his book, Meaningful Work, A Quest to Do Great Business, Find Your Calling, and Feed Your Soul, Shawn shares that not only is all of this possible, it's necessary. In 2005, Shawn left a successful career as a criminal defense lawyer to start a small batch chocolate factory. Named, quote, one of the top 25 best small companies in America by Forbes, Askinosie Chocolate shares 100% of their beans directly from farmers and shares profits with them. The company also partners with schools in their origin communities in Tanzania and the Philippines to provide lunch to 1,600 children every day with no outside donations. In our conversation, Shawn talks about how to find your calling, transitioning into a new career, and the power of reverse scale. Shawn challenges us all to leave the world a better place than we found it. Here's my conversation with Shawn Askinosie. Shawn Askinosie, what a treat to have you on. Thank you for taking a minute. You do such meaningful work, and so I appreciate you joining the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Molly. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you loved your job as a criminal defense lawyer, and it was meaningful work, and you were really, really good at it. But what made you decide to make a change and start a chocolate company? I mean, it's just a great story.
It's one of those things, and I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to this. I felt so called to that place where I was, and I did this criminal defense work for nearly 20 years. And my work was, or I should say my reputation was primarily built in the defense of people accused of murder. I just loved the work. And there came a time at the conclusion of a murder trial, which was a successful result, and I just kind of had this sense almost of body, mind, and spirit that this is over. I can't do it anymore. And at the time, of course, I just thought, well, I need to buy a Mercedes, which I did. And
a red convertible one?
Yeah, well, it was white convertible.
Right.
And I thought, this is the answer. Surely, spending some money will kind of tamp down this problem, but it didn't. So then the next 5 years of just continuing to practice law, but searching desperately for my next passion. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing was, I was looking at buying businesses or starting a business, but the trouble for me was I just didn't feel the draw. And I felt like I really needed that. I needed to feel a gravity almost to a project or a business or something. And so that was the real trouble for me.
Mm-hmm. So how did you turn this thought of starting your own business when you sort of got more and more clarity into action? Lots of people have ideas, right? But actually taking action on that sometimes doesn't happen. How did you actually take action on it?
During this 5-year search, I did a lot of research. I read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of people, thinking that I was going to sort of research my way into the answer to this problem. Because that's what I did as a lawyer. I worked really, really hard outside the courtroom to win. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't working for me. That strategy of, kind of reading, researching, listening my way into the answer didn't work. So I started volunteering in the palliative care department of a local hospital. And that really kind of sort of turned everything around for me. And then during that time of volunteering, which was about 5 years, usually one day a week, while I was still, practicing law, that kind of put me in a place where I could sort of consider other alternatives that I might not have otherwise thought of. And once this idea kind of popped into my head to make chocolate from scratch, and this was at a time when people didn't do that. I mean, we were one of the first in the country 12 years ago.
Sure.
I was starting to develop a hobby because I didn't have hobbies. I started cooking on my grill and that kind of thing. And then when this idea popped into my head of just an idea, I went to the Amazon within 3 months of that. So I think the key there and the sort of takeaway is that when the idea popped in my head, I bought a plane ticket. And I really think, again, I think that's something that your listeners can relate to, and that is, it's kind of weird when we look back on the bridge between idea, action, and plan. And so what I mean by that is I think the universe conspires to help us when we move from idea to taking a step. And that's what happened for me. So, I have this idea in May, and then in August, I'm in the Amazon and learning how farmers harvest cocoa beans. And then I came back from that experience and started to wind down my law practice and bought a building and buy equipment and, figure out how I was going to live on 15% of what I made as a lawyer.
So what advice do you have for people that are maybe feeling this way, that want to reinvent themselves, maybe reinvent their career? I love what you say, that whatever you do, don't Google what should I do with my life. Yeah. So what advice do you have for people that are feeling the way you're feeling and want to make a shift like that?
I think one of the first things is to begin to back away from the noise. And it's almost counterintuitive because for me, as a person who prided myself on research and that kind of strategy, I think that if one continues to participate in the noise, even though it might be instructive in some ways, I think if you don't step away from that at first, the tendency will be to latch on to the shiny object that comes along in the periphery, and we'll find ourselves in the same place again, a year, 2 years, 3 years.
So you maybe make a jump that isn't really the right jump.
Right. So I think it's really good to sort of counterintuitively step back from all of it. I mean, books, like my book even, and all of podcasts, Facebook, all the social media, just to step back a little bit and see if you can't spend some time just thinking about this, just on your own, journaling, writing, meditating, praying. And I think that really, to me, is the foundation for the creative next step. Yes, you can go to a conference and come home and change your life and pick your next career, but I really think this work has to be done on our own.
So you would almost say go on a silent retreat. You hear about those, or
yeah, maybe, or just take some walks, in a nearby national park, or just spend some time alone. And often for many of us, that's a scary place.
Sure.
Because we don't like the little ideas bouncing around in our monkey mind,
But something will bubble up in that moment, and that with that lack of noise in that space, you're saying.
It could. Yeah. I think it's quite possible. Yes, of course we can have teachers, and that's very important. I think that we have teachers in our lives in various forms. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to have to do this work ourselves on our own. If it's going to be the kind of thing that we're really going to find fulfilling and meaningful and lasting.
What about somebody who's in a job and, maybe they don't feel like it's meaningful work, but they feel like they're in the right spot, but they don't feel like the work that they're doing is meaningful enough to them in that particular role? What advice do you have for people who say, I don't want to change my career drastically, I don't even want to leave this company, but I need to find more meaning in this work that I'm doing here?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I think it's a great question. And maybe, interestingly, after I wrote this book, I really received a lot of emails from people who said what you just said, which is, hey, thanks for this book. After reading the book, I'm going to stay right where I am. I need to reposition myself right where I am. And it's kind of, for those people, some of the suggestions in the book might have created a shift in their thought, their attitude. And we know that, kind of it's almost the Wizard of Oz syndrome, that it's quite possible that the answer is literally 2 feet in front of us, right? I mean, and it's always been there. And I think it's so awesome and so cool when people can take this journey and begin this really deep introspection in their interior lives, in the company they're in, working and doing that, and then literally come to the solution that they're in the right place at the right time, and then reapproach where they are with a new attitude. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I wrote about this notion in my blog of stability. And as you know from reading my book, I'm really connected to monastic principles, and
Right.
I'm a family brother at Assumption Abbey, which is a Trappist monastery not far from my home. And so the monks, in fact, it's not just Christian monks, but many monks across religious communities take a vow of stability. And I think in our day and age that stability is a sort of a lost virtue. And so your question, I think, is a great one because it can mean that staying in this company, staying in this place where I am, is a matter of discipline. It's a matter of sort of readjusting my approach and attitude and staying in it for the long haul. And I think that's not often valued these days the way it used to be. And I think it's cool. And it's a monastic principle that I'm familiar with because
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
literally have to take a promise, a vow
Of
of stability.
stability. Interesting. Sure. Sure. Law and chocolate, Shawn, those don't always come together for me. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of overlap. What were the skills that you took from your career in law that you really could transfer to the chocolate space and to running your own business, obviously in a different vertical?
The first thing, I guess, is that I spent a lifetime almost looking for people who didn't want to be found. I was looking for witnesses in cases, and often they didn't want to talk to me. And that was a sort of minor skill set that I picked up over the years about just locating people. And now with Google, it's easier. But what's not easier and not often discussed is you can find people, but getting them to talk to you is a whole other matter. So it's a matter of building a trust relationship. And so I went from finding witnesses to finding farmers. And even though technology has advanced since I started the company 12 years ago, it still is, I think, a valuable skill set to be able to find someone and develop a trust relationship.
No
And so
question.
I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. And the next one is that while I was not a corporate lawyer, I didn't specialize in contracts and that sort of thing. I was really a trial lawyer. I wasn't intimidated by the sort of Byzantine regulations, rules, and laws that go with importing an agricultural product. And
Mm,
so I wouldn't say I was confident in understanding all of the shipping terms and that sort of thing, but it didn't frighten me away from trying to do it. And this is the backbone of our company is working directly with farmers, paying them directly, profit sharing with them, translating our financials into their language so they can understand how we calculate profit share with them. All of those things. But at the end, it means that I'm going to their farms. I just got back from the Philippines. Next month, I'm going to the Amazon. It'll be my 42nd origin trip since I started this thing.
that's
And
incredible.
and but then I'll see these cocoa beans and they'll end up in my factory. So I'm going to get a container of cocoa beans on Monday, literally from Ecuador. I
Hmm.
saw when I was there a few months ago. But the reason I'm bringing it up in the context of your question is that I wasn't intimidated by all of the legalities that go with bringing in these cocoa beans to my factory, and I think that helped. Now, the other side to that is because I wasn't intimidated and I had some level of confidence, I also can make mistakes because I sometimes thought, oh, I don't need a lawyer to look that over. I can do that myself. But I've learned the hard way years ago to hire a lawyer that can help with really specific matters, And so when it comes to things like intellectual property, which is really important, I don't labor under the notion that I can do that too. But anyway, I think it's helped. But I've also tried to develop new skill sets and compensate for the ones that I knew going in that I was going to have trouble with. Like for instance, I'd never had an accounting or finance class in college or law school. so I continue daily to pay the price for that. And I've had to really train myself to try to understand these principles as best I can. And I don't know, it's the jury's still out.
And were you intentional about putting people around you that had the skill set that represented the gaps that you had in your own skill set?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've really, I tried to do that from even before I started the company. I tried to meet with people who could help me and give me feedback on the business case. Does this make sense? And then over the years, and we have people who work here in our little company of 17 people who understand that, and then who can meet with me and teach me what I need to know, and so that I'm not just blindly accepting this as fact without trying to dig beneath and understand.
What was your biggest challenge early on?
Well, the biggest challenge early on was just actually making chocolate. And this is a thing. I mean, I made it in my law office kitchen, but I did it, 1 or 2 pounds at a time. And to scale that to 200 pounds, I thought foolishly, now that I look back on it, oh, well, that, I'll just buy the equipment. But I actually quit my job as a lawyer. I mean, I took a partner and wound down my practice, so she was handling that. And I bought equipment from all over the world. I bought this building. I hired employees. And then I couldn't make chocolate. Literally couldn't finish it. I couldn't temper it. And that was, I would say, in the beginning, one of the most challenging times when I would literally go to bed at night and think, what have I done? I took our entire life savings. I've put it in this thing, and I can't even make a product. And that was a real bummer.
So what'd you do about that?
Well, what most people do, I got my checkbook out and bought some more equipment, just to solve the problem by buying more stuff. And I did. I bought some equipment from Germany that was very, very precise. I still have it to this day. But what I did to even know to do that is I sought out a consultant that was kind of world renowned in this industry. And he said, do this. And I did that. And that was the answer to the problem. And then I would say the ongoing problem, not problem, but the ongoing challenge would relate to what we were talking about a minute ago, which is managing a business out of cash flow. So my wife of 32 years is very debt averse. I'll borrow anything from anyone at any time. So we're a nice balance. And what this means is that we don't have a lot of debt. And so I have to manage the business out of cash flow. And we're profitable.
Good for her.
Yeah.
She's a good wing woman.
Oh, wow. I mean, if I hear another Dave Ramsey quote, I could probably rewrite his book just from her quotes. But
she's good for you.
Yeah, she is. She is. And she, put our daughter through college on a chocolate maker's salary as opposed to a trial lawyer's salary. So, I mean, she's been great in that respect. But managing out of cash flow is not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
So tell our listeners what makes Askinosie Chocolate different.
I think one of the things that makes it different is we have this understanding, I think, that really permeates the company, that who we are as people, how we behave, ends up in our product. And what I mean by that is the work that we do around the world, taking local high school kids to Tanzania, profit sharing with farmers. We're feeding nearly 1,000 kids a day. We've provided 1 million school lunches to malnourished kids in Tanzania and the Philippines. All of that together means something. And what it means is it's who we are. It's how we behave. It's what we do during the day. And I think that ends up in our product. And so I think that's one of the distinguishing features of our company. And we let the vocations of the company, the callings of the company, guide and drive what we do. And I think that's different.
So when you think about business and you think about the world that we live in, what's wrong with how we look at the relationship between profits and purpose?
I think often, depending on the size of the company, we're sort of conditioned in this culture to believe that the philanthropy and charitable activities of a company needs to be siloed in that other department over there. And it started in the 60s with corporate social responsibility departments, which were basically lawyers that were there in companies in that particular department to mitigate risk. That's where CSR was founded.
Sure.
And it's sort of morphed into now the philanthropic arm of the company. And I think that that is a mistake. And while it is challenging and maybe messy at times, I think it's important that those silos be diffused throughout the organization and let employees and everyone who wants to be part of the good works of the company, let their lives be transformed by that work. Many, many companies that we know of, in the United States and around the world do really great work, but often it's just siloed in the philanthropy department. And I think that's a mistake. And I think that capitalism is, as we know it, currently undergoing evolution and revolution as it relates to profit and loss and accountability to shareholders for the work that they do in the world. I think it's changing, and I think it's changing for the good. And I think it's in large measure being driven by employees and consumers. And so I feel good about it.
So really integrate your purpose, thread it through the entire organization in the way that you show up and the work that you do and the people that you serve.
I think so. It's not as easy. I mean, it's because it can be kind of messy.
Sure.
And the other thing is then it also becomes a little bit more challenging to report in an annual report or consumer-facing activities. But I think it's worth it to let the sort of messiness just be okay in a kind of wabi-sabi sort of way. And I think that's fine, because I think you'll get better results. I think you'll get more fulfilled employees, and I think they'll be more connected to their work. Gallup says that 2/3 of the American workforce is disengaged.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's a staggering. Oh, I agree.
And it's been that way for like 2 decades. I mean, and I think that the millennials are doing something to help change that.
Yeah.
I think they're driving change in that area.
So you identify as an organization the thing that you potentially, through obviously a lot of conversation and thought, what you're most passionate about giving back to. And then you identify the way that you do the work that you do and how to then use that as a vehicle, like you do, to give back and to serve others.
I think so. I mean, I think one of the important things for entrepreneurs or partners or companies to think about is what called you to this business in the first place? And then how can you pull that thread through the work that you're doing today and stay connected to it? And for us, for example, the calling is to make the best tasting direct trade chocolate in the world. Well, that is supported by 2 other callings within the company. One is to work directly with farmers. I love working with farmers. I travel a long way to get there. I think it matters in the quality of our product, but it also just matters because we're a small company and I like doing it. I don't mind, traveling 50 hours to get to the Philippines. And I've been doing that now for 10 years. And I think that those relationships that I develop with farmers supports this calling we have to work with farmers. Why farmers? Well, my grandparents were farmers in Southwest Missouri, and I want to honor them. And we work with students. Working with students is a calling for us. Why? Because I had an influential teacher who was really kind in the 5th and 6th grade. And that stuck with me all these years. And I think that, working with students and working with farmers supports our calling, our to work with farmers to make great tasting direct trade chocolate. And I think that companies can spend some time, or entrepreneurs even on their own who are thinking of starting a company, what is it besides making money that drives me?
Sure.
Where can I find a place to roll up my sleeves and connect in a way that transforms my life? And is there a way that I can do that at work and have a for-profit business? And I think the answer is yes.
Right.
Just take some time to really pull all that out.
Sure.
That's why I think just jumping to the next thing can be a mistake. I think companies can spend time, whether they're starting tomorrow or whether they've been in business for 25 years, can spend time thinking about this and then how to diffuse that work throughout the organization. It could be in the company's neighborhood, on their street, in schools in that area. It could be anything. It could be in their industry, people that need them.
In just a minute, we'll get back to the episode. But first, here's a free resource I want to share with you. How many of you are leaving money on the table because of costly negotiation mistakes? Getting the best possible outcome in a negotiation can be a challenge. Most people leave money on the table because they don't know how to navigate the conversation. We get it, and we're here to help. Go to 5negotiationmistakes.com to download our free PDF, 5 Negotiation Mistakes Costing You Money. In this free resource, you will learn how to avoid common mistakes. You discover things like how to identify and adapt to different style negotiators, how to maximize your deal points, how to ask with confidence. Once you read this PDF, you'll no longer feel frustrated and overwhelmed when it's time to negotiate. So here's all you need to do next. Download 5 Negotiation Mistakes Costing You Money. Check it out, read it, review it, and start negotiating like a pro. All you have to do is go to 5negotiationmistakes.com for the free download. That's 5 like the number 5, negotiationmistakes.com. Now back to the conversation. What do you think about the one-to-one model, right? Like companies like Tom's that Tom's really popularized. What are your thoughts on that model and whether it works?
I don't like the model.
Okay.
And the reason I don't like the model is because I think at some point it begins to break down if the focus is buy my thing and I'm going to be a charitable person. Buy my 1 unit of thing and I will be 1 unit of charitable. Buy another unit and I'll be another unit of charitable. I think that breaks down. I don't think it's sustainable in the long, long haul.
Because if you're not selling the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't like the models of I don't like it for us. We don't do that and say, buy this thing and we'll do this thing with it. I think it's okay. It's just not who we are. And I think that one of the main reasons that I have a problem with it is because ultimately, if you're making a thing and the sales are dependent on the quality of the thing, and so in other words, what I mean is not a commodity. So if you're selling, I don't care what it is, golf clubs, shoes, anything, and it depends on the quality. If your focus is on what you're doing with that 1 unit of charity and not laser focused on the quality of that thing, then eventually the trend line will be down. You will not focus on the quality of that thing. And this is why I say I am super, super competitive when it comes to our chocolate and entering these competitions around the world. And now, I have a whole lot of competition in the chocolate world that I didn't have when I started 12 years ago. And I'm not competing against them as so much as I am myself. I want to win awards where people and judges and whomever are acknowledging the quality of our product apart from the good works that we do. Why? Because I don't want you to say, Shawn, you're a cool guy and I like your story and I'm going to buy your chocolate because I think you feed a lot of kids, and you buy it and it tastes like sawdust, but you're like, well, it's kind of a good story. Maybe it tastes a little bit better than I think it does, and I'll give it another try. I don't want that.
Yeah, you don't want charity.
No, I want you to buy it because you like it.
Right, and it's good.
Oh, by the way, there's a good story behind it, and I want to support that. That's what I want.
Right. You talk a little bit in the book about the difference between direct trade and fair trade, and we tend to see that fair trade sticker, right? And you sort of feel good about what you're purchasing, but it's not that simple, is it? Can you talk about that?
I only know fair trade chocolate and cocoa. I don't say that I'm really an expert about any of it, but I'm certainly not an expert about fair trade, bracelets or fair trade shoes or anything like that. But when it comes to cocoa, the overreaching problem with the fair trade model is that studies have shown that the premium that we pay in the store, when you go to whatever store in Atlanta and you pick up a chocolate bar that has a fair trade sticker on it, that premium that you're paying is not making its way to the farmer. But many people don't know that.
Sure.
They think that when they're paying a little extra for this chocolate bar at the store, that they're supporting a better life for this farmer. And the truth is that it's not.
So what is it doing?
Well, it's being siphoned off in the supply chain before it reaches the store shelf. And so often the fair trade model is such that there are so many layers of administration and the cooperative and then all these other people along the way in the supply chain from the port of origin to ultimately to the store that there's just nothing left.
Got it.
And it's pennies that a farmer would make. But the problem is that as consumers, we've kind of come to expect this direct connection between a fair trade label and, oh, we're doing a good thing for these farmers. And it's just, unfortunately, it's not the case. It's great marketing. And I think that even the Fair Trade Organization would recognize to some extent that they've sort of marketed themselves into a corner with this. Because, for example, if you're going to pay, let's just say that the price is $3,000 a metric ton for cocoa beans, and the fair trade premium for a buyer of those cocoa beans in order to call them fair trade is $200 over a $3,000 purchase. I mean, that's just, the math doesn't work on that.
Right, sure.
And so it's just not enough. And so what we do is, I don't have, a fair trade certification, but what we do is I go myself and have for 12 years, and I buy the beans and I put the money in the farmers' bank accounts. In some cases, I help them open bank accounts. So we're dissolving layers of middlemen and women that are not needed. Now, some of them, of course, are. I mean, we need truck drivers, to bring it from the farm to the port and stuff like that. But I'm talking about, real money in their account directly to them. And at the end of the year, when I go back to buy the next crop, I bring our financials in their language. So when I'm in Tanzania, our financials are in Swahili. And then I give them money, profit share, from the sales of the previous crop and the chocolate that we make. So then I put it on my website, and we have on our website something called the Transparency Report, and it lists out every bean purchase that we've ever made, who we paid, how much they got, how it compared to the world market price, the fair trade price, and what's called the farm gate price. And that's really kind of the apples to apples comparison. And so far in the last 12 years, we've paid farmers 55% more than they would have otherwise received.
God, that's such a great story.
But I'm not sitting here. I don't want to lead you to believe I'm moving the needle. I mean, I'm just a little speck in the pond of cocoa buyers, but at least it's a start,
Sure.
and it means something to these farmers.
Tell me more about the impact you've made on the lives of the farmers in the communities that you work in.
I think the best example would probably be in Tanzania. This is a 60-member farmer cooperative on Lake Nyasa, one of the largest lakes in Africa. And it's really hard to get to. It takes about 60 hours on average, door to door, for me to get there. And we have, I think, in that origin, probably made the biggest impact, because we have a person who graduated from the University of Dar es Salaam, a Tanzanian woman that we hired several years ago, who lives in the village with the farmers. And we fund and staff an Empowered Girls program. We have 5 different Empowered Girls clubs in that village to give girls a sense of self-esteem and to understand that they're not property. And this has been going on for years, and we've made a real significant impact in the lives of these girls and boys. We started a boys program because there wasn't a boys program. So we started something called Enlightened Boys. And that program is full now with a waiting list. And, the list goes on. We're, as I said before we started recording, we're right now literally in the middle of constructing a preschool for 300 children in the village. This was a vision of the farmers, and we're in the midst of working with the farmers on their 10-year vision plan. And we have a donor that, one donor family who paid for the whole school. And it's really nice, that people would share this vision with us and be able to help. I mean, so this is, to answer your question, I would say an example of, and we have a feeding program. Our little company, we've provided over 1 million school lunches to children in Tanzania, malnourished children in Tanzania and the Philippines. And all of that without one single donation. That's all in a self-sustaining program that we have called a Product of Change. And that is something that we're really proud of. And so
I bet
that's real food and helping these kids be able to have some nourishment and warmth.
And real lives,
Yeah,
real children.
exactly.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
awesome. In the book, you talk about the idea of reverse scale. I just want to talk about that for a minute. And you talk about this guiding principle you have, which is not to get bigger, but to get better at staying small. Tell me about that.
We are conditioned in this North American culture to believe that an idea is only valuable if it can scale. And we hear this all the time, from investors who say, I need to know how this thing scales or it's not valuable to me. Chambers of commerce want to know because it means more jobs in the community, and your family wants to know because they think you're going to get rich if this idea scales. So what I'm asking people to think about is, what if this idea only helps one person or only helps you? Is it still valuable? And I think the answer can be a resounding yes. And so I think that as entrepreneurs, really employees, if we can remember what drew us to the business in the first place, why 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, what was the thing that really called us to this work? And if we can, either when starting a company, stay connected to that thing, and literally make it a practice and a discipline, or if we can reconnect to that thread, then I believe our lives will be more fulfilled, more joyful, and perhaps, maybe it's possible, yes, that our companies may not grow with triple digit growth. We may not, end up with 1,000 locations for our business. But I think that there's a chance that if we remain connected to the thing that brought us here to begin with, that we can find joy in the day. And I'm not saying it's going to be every day. I asked this one of our customers about a year ago, can you remember a time in your business when you said to yourself, this is awesome right now, this thing that's happening, this day or whatever, it's just not going to get any better than this. This is the best day. This is like the best day ever. Can you remember? Nope, I can't. Well, that's a problem.
It's a problem.
Yeah. And yes, of course, yes, he just got venture capital funding for the next round. And yeah, but we are led to believe that the health of our economy is based on consumption. We talk about it all the time.
Sure.
And that the health of our companies is based on top line sales growth.
Right.
Well, what about other things that we can measure to determine the health of our companies? And I just think that we need to sort of step away from this notion of scale as it relates to business and see if we can find other avenues of growth and stay connected to this
greater meaning.
Yeah, that brought us there to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. I love in the book when you talk about the difference between being and doing. It's good stuff. Can you speak to that?
The monastery that I go to is called Assumption Abbey, and it's in the middle of the Mark Twain National Forest. And I've been going there for 19 years just on retreat. And about 5 years ago, I became a family brother, which really just means I wrote this rule of life, and they approved it. And I live with the monks when I'm there on their side of the Abbey, and I follow their schedule, getting up at 3:00 in the morning for the first prayer service. But one of the things that my spiritual director there really challenged me with is, he said, Shawn, you live a life of doing inserted by being, but I'd like you to think about living a life of being inserted by doing. And so the real question there is, well, just think about it. We've been talking for the last 45 minutes about doing
Right.
all these projects, right? All this stuff.
Sure.
And so he's right. And so my aspiration, and this is a daily thing for me, is what does that mean if I could live a life of being inserted by doing? Well, what it means is that if you think about the center of a circle and then the concentric circles that reach out from that, if I could make the center a life of being, then the doing will sort of come naturally. I don't think it will be as stressful. I don't think it will be the most important thing in my life. And so for me, the being part relates directly to my faith for me.
Mm-hmm,
For
mm-hmm,
others, it may
mm-hmm.
be something else. And so that is the sort of center point of being for me, which is asking the question, why am I doing this thing, whatever this next thing may be? Why am I doing it? What is the purpose behind it?
Mm-hmm.
And if the purpose behind it is directly connected to a truth in my faith, then I think I'm staying sort of nestled in that place that I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that's a matter of meditation, it's a matter of prayer, it's a matter of centering and just staying connected. And if I can just continue to ask myself the question of why I'm doing this next thing and what's the purpose of it, then I think I can stay connected to being as opposed to doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the real trick in this is that when we are doing so-called good works and community development and helping people, we can sort of be tricked into thinking that we can do more and more and more because it's good.
Sure.
It's good.
Right.
But that's a dangerous place to be because
Mm-hmm.
you end up thinking the answer is buying a convertible Mercedes or something. I mean, it's not a good. It's not good.
Stuff never makes us happy. No question.
Exactly.
What role, you talked about faith and you talked about your spirituality. What role has your faith and your spirituality played in your journey? Because it sounds like from what I've read and listened to your work, it's evolved for you over the years.
It has evolved, and the sort of real challenge, I guess, came as a teenager when I was 14. My dad died of lung cancer, and he was a lawyer like me, and it was really hard for me. And the sort of, I guess, real disruption came as a teenager. The church people would come over, and they told me to, never talk about death with my dad. That Jesus wouldn't heal him if I did talk about death, because that would be a sign of doubt. So when he died, and I was with him when he died, that was a real disruptive moment. A truly desperate moment in my life to be with him when he died. And I thought he was going to live, as ridiculous as that was. I mean, the cancer was everywhere in his body. And so I spent a long time, I spent many years really just challenging that whole thing. And I felt disconnected. But as it turned out, I think as I now reflect back on those long years behind me in my rearview mirror, I see that I really was connected. And so I think where it really started to change for me is what we talked about at the beginning of the program, which is when I concluded this murder case, and I believed in the case, I believed in the result, but something happened, and I spent 5 years, kind of battling increasing anxiety and depression and taking antidepressants and volunteering and doing these things. But it's that place, it's that time in my life when I reconnected to what I would call an authentic faith. And that's when I started going to the monastery and just going on retreat and spending time by myself in solitude. And now all these years later, I feel like, as you say, it has evolved, and it's evolving to this day.
Sure.
But it's the most important thing in my life, and I try to let it spill over into everything that I do. I should say that's aspirational. I mean, I'm not a saint. I'm not a pastor. I'm not any of those
But
things.
you keep it at the center of the decisions you make, it sounds like, and the way in which you want to be.
I do.
Use your word being.
Yes, I do. So it's really important to me, and to, I've forgiven the people of the church who treated me like that, when I was a teenager, and I've forgiven them, and they were doing the best they could at the time. And I don't regret anything that's happened to me in my life, including that really challenging time, because I believe that going through that experience with my dad for 2.5 years when he was so sick, and it was just so hard for me. And it was the depths of sorrow. And I believe that I learned during that time to speak a language that none of us want to learn ever, which is the language of brokenheartedness. And I feel like I became pretty fluent in that language. And I'm glad that I did, because it allows me to see things now in business and just in the world through a lens that I would not have otherwise had the chance to to see. Joseph Campbell says that we're called to joyfully participate in the sorrows of the world, which is really kind of a restatement of a Buddhist principle. And I ascribe to that. I believe that is absolutely true. And I believe it's true in business.
Sure. Bring joy to tough moments. Bring joy to sadness. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Shawn, we end with rapid fire. So I'm going to fire off some questions, and you just fire off what comes up.
All right.
Let's do this. Okay, what's your favorite book?
Tuesdays with Maury.
Really? Okay, cool. Yeah. Favorite place you've traveled?
The favorite place I've traveled would be Mababu, Tanzania, the village there. I've seen heaven in that village, so yeah, it's my favorite place.
Oh my gosh. What's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is, I would say, and this is going to come as a surprise, but it's just the truth, death, because of, I think, my experience with my dad.
I bet. What is a guilty pleasure of yours?
Oh, man. I would say probably apple pie. I love apple pie and ice cream. I really do. I really love ice cream. And so that ice cream really of any kind with anything with it would probably be my guilty pleasure.
With cocoa on top.
Yeah, of course.
Favorite part of your work?
The favorite part of my work is traveling to meet with cocoa farmers. I love that. I feel probably more alive during those experiences than any other time.
So the show's called Game Changers. What game changer inspires you and why?
I think the game changer that inspires me is Jean Vanier. Jean Vanier has written many books, but he's a 88-year-old Catholic theologian, but he's known for founding L'Arche, and that's the L'Arche community in France, and now there's 150 of these little places around the world, and it's where people who have intellectual disabilities are living in community with those that don't. And Jean Vanier founded this in the 60s, and they're all over the world.
Interesting.
I think his most popular book that I'm rereading right now is called Becoming Human. The reason I think he's a game changer is because his whole point is that when we become weak and we understand our frailties in ourselves and in others, we see life in a way that we didn't before. And I believe this to be true. We push away our weaknesses. We don't want to be weak. And we don't often want to connect with those who are weak because of what it might say about us. But he's a game changer in that way because he speaks of kindness and tenderness and joy and connectedness. And I think that is needed in this world.
No question. Shawn, tell me, how can people, where is Askinosie Chocolate distributed? How can we support what you do?
Well, thank you for asking. The first way would be just the website, askinosie.com, and people can buy chocolate and a lot of other products there, and we ship all over the country. And there's a zip code locator on our website on the homepage where people can plug and see if there's a specialty food store or something near you that might carry our products, and then just follow our work on social media and our newsletter and my blog, ShawnAskinosie.com.
And Shawn, you sent me a bar. I loved it. I'm a big cocoa person, and
thank you.
It's there's so many health benefits to cocoa, of course, and so it was, I have to say, very yummy. So thank you for sharing one with me. Awesome.
Thank you.
Shawn, thanks for coming on. Thanks for the work that you do, and certainly the farmers and the lives that you impact. It's awesome.
Well, thanks for having me, Molly. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. On the next episode of Game Changers, former vice chair at GE, Beth Comstock, joins me to talk about her new book, Imagine It Forward. We talk about what sparks innovation and how to mobilize people around change in a world where the pace of change is faster than ever. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.